All right, this is an idea that I don't exactly know how to articulate, but I'm going to try anyway. And I'm going to try doing it through an example to see if I get the feeling across. Have you ever been in a situation where you just don't really know what to do? Like, okay, that's pretty general, but what I mean is a situation where it almost feels like for a while your vision is closing and it feels like you are running out of options, or maybe that you have no options, right? A situation where it feels like everything is, closing in on you. And in that moment, you exist only as you relate to that situation. You lose your sense of self, you lose your sense of being, and nothing else. It's not even that nothing else even matters, it's that nothing else even exists, right? Because in that moment, you are just stuck. In those moments, it's really difficult to know what to do, to know what action to take. And you can often end up taking actions that you don't want to because you have a perceived limit of the things that you can do, right? In those situations, at least when it's happened to me, there's this feeling where, let's say that I'm in that situation, right? And I'm able to just go for a walk. I'm able to get outside and just go for a walk. I will start to realize that almost this feeling of having escaped it. I will realize that I do not solely exist within that situation, within those circumstances. I start to remember that I'm a separate person from the issue. That regardless of what happens, right, something might get resolved, maybe it doesn't, that I will persist. The person that I am will persist. And that is a very freeing feeling because if it feels like everything is closing in on you, having that sort of, the right word isn't dichotomy, but that's just that difference, right? Can help you to realize, oh, like, no, you're okay. And a lot of situations might feel like that. So with that feeling, I've just been thinking about that because I've been in those kinds of situations before where it feels like everything's closing in and you don't know what to do. And every time that I've gotten some distance, and sometimes I haven't been able to, but every time that I've gotten some distance, I've been able to think more clearly. And I've been able to just make better decisions and better understand and therefore articulate my thoughts as a result, right? It doesn't have to be a walk, but sometimes it could literally just be going outside, right? Like if you're really frustrated at work, sometimes just getting up off of your desk, away from your desk, right? Just like leaving that situation. Because what I think all of this boils down to is it's not just environments, but it's a combination of different things, including environments and emotions, maybe people, whatever it might be, right? That will trigger almost like it feels almost like a wall. Like you block yourself from seeing anything else. The only thing that your mind almost exists in this caricatured state, right? Like in a state of either a single emotion or a single thought, right? Some predicament. And I don't think that there have ever been any good decisions that come out of feeling like that. There are no good decisions that come from feeling cornered in that way, that come from feeling like everything around you is falling in on you, right? Coming in on you. And I think it is important, and I'm almost making this video for myself in a sense. It's important to remember that you can get out of that. And sometimes the best decisions are made when you're able to step out from that. And when you're able to look at the situation from outside, right? Look at the situation from another angle. When you do that, you start to feel free. You start to realize that you will persist. Now, I'm just going to make sure, again, I'm recording real quick. Nice. So this video is probably not going to be too long because it's actually kind of late, but I wanted to make sure I recorded something today. And this is something that's been on my mind. I think I used to have a job where a part of that job, there were a lot of different responsibilities, right? But one of the big responsibilities was that I, working at a college, had to talk to a lot of students. And I had to listen to a lot of students, right? And kind of provide a level of support for a lot of students. And sometimes very often people would come to me and talk to me about all sorts of different things, right? And I had to, like I mentioned, I had to be a support there. But sometimes the things they came to me to talk about were very heavy, sometimes very dark, right? Sometimes very intense, sometimes so strong, right? So deeply negative that the situations they talked to me about, and I would try my best to help and support them, even though that's not something that, people in that job are particularly trained for, right? It's just kind of a byproduct of the position. In those situations, I would try my hardest to do what I could to help. But even then, sometimes it was overpowering. The darkness that came from just some of the situations that these people were in was so overpowering that it would be overbearing. And it would feel like, again, I would get in that same feeling of closing in, right? Maybe it's that I would empathize with them so strongly, but I would start to feel everything closing in on my own life. And in those moments, I only existed in relation to those people and in relation to their problem. And sometimes things were hopeless, right? There were so many, I'm not going to say that they were hopeless, but so many things felt hopeless. And I think the same can be said for a lot of the situations that you might find yourself in, right? That I find myself in. So many situations just feel so hopeless because it feels like there's no options, or that the options that there are rapidly decreasing, right? And in those situations, I just remember having this feeling like being in that situation. And sometimes people would come and I would talk with these people for like 5 hours, right? And then they'd leave and it'd be late at night and I'd just be in my head, right? Feeling everything closing in on me, all of these walls. I couldn't see anything, right? And then I'd get up, right? Because they left. Maybe I'd step outside for a sec. And all of a sudden, I just realized that I was not that person and that their issues weren't mine, right? And that sounds maybe a little bit cold, but when you talk with enough people about enough things like that, right, you just start to develop maybe a level of, I started recognizing that feeling of distance, right? Where I could step away from a situation, step out of a situation, and suddenly get that feeling of freedom again. And remember, oh, that wasn't me. That's not my situation, right? That's not something I have to worry about. Yeah, I just became very familiar with that feeling of, oh, that's not me. That's not my situation. And feeling that level of freedom, feeling that level of hope again, and the realization, oh, I will persist. I do persist. I'm a person separate from this, and the experience that I'm having is one that will continue regardless of whatever happens in that person's situation, right? I became very good because talking with enough people about enough things like that, you just start to familiarize yourself with that feeling. And what I think is interesting is that I've started to notice that feeling in situations that I'm in as well, because I have that feeling for other people. But at the same time, if I'm in maybe a dark situation, right, or in a dark place, or maybe I'm in a certain predicament, right, where again I feel the options, I feel things closing in, and I feel like the options dwindling, and I feel maybe like things are starting to be a little bit hopeless, and I start to lose my sense of self, right? In those situations, once I'm able to take a step back, once I'm able to maybe leave that situation or maybe go outside or whatever it might be, I feel that feeling again. It almost, in a way, feels like the you that experiences the current moment. Sometimes the current moment is one in which you are in a predicament, right? Like that, feeling that same tunneling. But other moments, when you're outside of that, that's a different you. That's kind of weird, but it's the same you, right? It's the you doing the experiencing, right? But you can always distance yourself from the predicament, because the you that you feel yourself as being within that predicament, that's only a part of your experience. You are behind that. You are beyond that, outside of that, right? And it can almost feel like you can take the perspective of a different person. You can take the perspective as though you are not the person experiencing that predicament, right? You're outside of it. And when you do that, it feels very similar to what I mentioned before when I talk with other people. And so I think being able to do that to yourself means that you are just able to take a better look at the situation, right? Like, I feel it's so much easier to give advice to another person. It's hard to look at your situation and know what the right thing to do is. And sometimes it's easy to look at what someone else is doing and it's like, why don't you understand? Right? Like, why don't you do the right thing? Because I can see your situation. I see what your problem is and I know how you can fix it. Right? And sometimes you can feel that for other people, but it's hard to look at your own situation and you're confused. What do you do? Right? It's your own situation. You can't look at it in the same way because you're within it. You can't look at the full picture. You're inside the picture, right? But if you can treat yourself like another person, if you can step away and pretend for a moment that the experiences you just had, the predicament you're in, the circumstances you're in, right? If you can just pretend for a moment as you're going on a walk, as you're stepping outside, as you're just getting some distance between you and that situation, if you can pretend like that was another person, like you learned about all that through conversation with another person, you can kind of, in a sense, push yourself into a different point of view. You can push yourself to look at things with a new angle or with a new perspective, right? Almost as though you were talking to someone about it. And that way you just might gain a different insight. First of all, you're just going to feel, at least in my case, things feel a lot more hopeful. And I'm able to recognize things that I hadn't recognized before. And I can't think so well when it feels like everything is closing in on me. But when I step out of that, I know that, at least personally, I develop new insights. I develop a new level of understanding. And all of a sudden, I'm coming from a place where I can make decisions, and sometimes difficult decisions, right? Because if you're in a situation like that, you don't feel like you have any power. You don't feel like you have the power to make maybe sometimes the decisions that you need to make, right? Maybe they don't even look like decisions at all, right? Just because you don't have that capacity. When you step outside and you remember that you are a person beyond the predicament, that you exist as yourself and you will continue to, that you will persist beyond this and anything else that comes your way, that you will persist, that you will continue, you will be you and you will continue to be. Now you have not leverage, but you have something to fall back on, right? You have something to stand from yourself. Not your permanence, but the fact that you will make it through, that you know that, because you have thus far, and you will continue to, or you will die. In which case, it doesn't matter because you won't be aware. You won't be aware of it, right? So you will persist. And when you understand that, when you have that feeling, right, then you can go back to whatever predicament you're in and you can come from that place, knowing the permanence of yourself and the temporality, the temporariness of the situation. You will persist. And God, if I knew that earlier, I could have saved myself from making so many mistakes in situations I've had in the past. I've definitely made some mistakes because I lost my sense of myself. I thought that I was the situation and that if a certain situation ended, that I would end. And that just ruined me for a while. But then I realized I persist. The same way that you will continue to persist beyond whatever is happening, beyond whatever situation or predicament or circumstances you're in, you will continue to persist. And if you can really understand that, and if you can give yourself some space and look back at your situation from the outside, from the you that is now experiencing that outside, as opposed to the you that was in that tunnel with everything closing in around you, you'll be able to make better decisions. You'll be able to view things differently in a way that's more productive, that's more helpful, more hopeful. And you can have the strength that you need, the foundation that you need to be able to make the decisions that you need to make that will be better for you in the long term. You need that perspective. You need to be able to step outside, to give yourself that distance, and to understand that you are a person and that you will persist, that you are not the situation you're in. You are not the circumstance you're in. You are not your circumstances. You're not your situation. You're not your predicament, right? You need to step outside of that. You are more than all that. You can step beyond that. And by doing that, you'll be able to make the right decision.